Welcome back to another games I finished this year so far. A weird public genre entry where I talk about games that I don't feel like making an actual full video about. A second and a final one of this year. No further explanations needed. Let's start with the honorable mentions. In the previous episode I mentioned that I probably won't manage to actually fit every game I finished this year so far into this video. And that turned out to be true. This episode will cover my overall favorite and most important / impactful games I played this year, which obviously means a lot of games will simply be left out. Whether it's because I felt like I don't have anything interesting to say about them, or, and this was the very more common case, I didn't find the right place for them here, and I don't have enough time before school to comfortably make another video dedicated just for them. But completely ignoring them feels, I don't know, kinda mean-spirited. Maybe disrespectful to the time I enjoyed with them. So right now, I just want to acknowledge these games for a second, that's all. Even if it means just showing few clips from them. Feel free to skip this section in case you just want to get your rest. I know this is probably kinda weird, but it just feels important for me to have this part here. Okay, let's start. Now let's start for real. And let's start from the bottom. Zero Time Dilemma is the last part of the Zero Escape games, yet another series I haven't talked about nearly enough as I would like, and by that I mean not at all. TLDR, it's a slightly more grounded than Danganronpa, very slightly. A series about solving escape room puzzles, interacting with its wide cast of characters and switching between different timelines in a non-linear fashion in order to unlock new parts of the story. It also has an amazing soundtrack, and in general there's this cozy vibe of a weird visual novel that likes to shift between hilarious comedy, random pseudoscience lectures and gruesome horror. But I'm digressing. I'm supposed to be talking about this game, the last one in this series. It's not great. Some of the things I praised just now are actually still intact here. The escape rooms are, for example, still a lot of fun. Even though I'm not super big into puzzles in general, slowly figuring out a way out of these rooms and putting together clues and hints leading to that is just incredibly satisfying. Not even mentioning the constant creativity of the scenarios and locations. The mechanic of switching between timelines is still also present, now with the added twists of having to deal with memory loss and being split into teams instead of following a single protagonist, which means that the plot is now way more fractured and intentionally confusing. So far it doesn't sound that bad really, but here it comes. It just doesn't feel like a satisfying conclusion at all, and that's for a variety of reasons. Its new cast of characters is rather weak, both the newcomers and returning characters just feel less interesting and the interactions aren't as engaging, which especially hurts when combined with some of the redesigns. The presentation overall isn't great either, with stiff animations and editing that make the storytelling kinda jarring and hard to push through. Its intro is super confusing, almost as if there's a prologue or an intro missing, and the final nail in the coffin is that the actual conclusion is very disappointing. Zero Escape is a series famous for insane twists and wild endings that completely redefine everything that happened in the story so far. So it sucks to see the final game include a plot twist that desperately wants to be shocking but ends up being too nonsensical for its own sake. And mainly, this game is open-ended. There's no actual resolution, the game just kinda ends, to the point where I first assume I did something wrong or that it's a fake out, that's how bad it is. And chance that we'll ever get an actual ending sometimes in the future is pretty much zero. Granted, this game also had a pretty rocky development, as it was initially supposed to come out shortly after the second game in the series, Virtual's Last Reward, but stuff happened. That means it's a bit of a miracle Zero Time Dilemma even exists, which of course on its own doesn't make the game automatically better. But honestly, after seeing all the bad reviews and my initial reaction from the first hour I played some time ago right after finishing Virtual's Last Reward, I expected a genuinely painful, dreadful experience. But that didn't happen, and all I got was just a very disappointing conclusion with parts and aspects I still enjoyed. You should still absolutely play the first two in this series. They are some of my favorite games overall, and if you like them, give this one a shot as well. Maybe you'll get more out of it than I did. And now, we can move on to the successor to Zero Escape. Well, a spiritual successor really. AI, the Somnium files, has the same director, takes place in the same universe, it uses the same timeline system, and that's about it when it comes to the similarities. It's now a detective story instead of a survivor game. There's less characters and they're not as over the top. The main focus of the game now shifting more on its main protagonist and his partner. And escape rooms have been replaced with time trial puzzles. I honestly don't know how else to describe this minigame and its mechanic of using limited time as a currency for interactions. If it sounds weird, that's because it is. It's kinda awkward to actually play, and it never clicked with me in the same way the escape rooms did. So far I probably don't sound super excited about this game, and that's because I'm not. It's not bad, don't take me wrong, and overall it's definitely more enjoyable than Zero Time Dilemma. It looks pretty good, with way more smoother character models and animations. Its characters and their interactions are lovely, and I like some of them even more than some of my favorites from Zero Escape. The main case is captivating throughout the entire game, it's base, and I overall enjoyed my time with this. Probably the best way to put this is they just didn't really stick to landing for me. It felt like luster when compared to the experiences writers of this game gave me before. It felt watered down. The core loop of this game just wasn't as fun for me and it felt more linear, probably because there's not that many timelines to go through compared even to the first Zero Escape game. And the final twist, while honestly pretty good, wasn't as good when compared to the Zero Escape games. That's the issue when you build your writing reputation on insane endings with huge twists. You either run out of juice or make your player base expect the impossible, and I think both kinda happen here. I'm still planning to have a look at Nirvana Initiative as well, which is honestly a game I wasn't even aware existed before writing this script, but I'm hoping it will finally manage to feel like a step forward instead of an awkward phase of limbo. The best way to quickly describe Resident Evil Village is a best hits album. Where Resident Evil 7 focused on being as scary, atmospheric and disgusting as possible, Village does occasionally exactly that, but it also does more. It has everything from a classic survival horror mansion setup of the first game, now including giant vampire mummies. An action-filled set-piece / boss fight with a giant fish monster, super intense encounter with an army of werewolves, or some of the absolute best horror the series has ever done. In general, this is a game of highs. It has some of my favorite locations of the entire series, some of my favorite characters, some of my favorite moments, and some of my favorite exploration. Its story is weird and messy and honestly something that occasionally feels more like a plot of an indie horror than a AAA game in a huge long-running series. It also has a superb atmosphere and engaging combat and decent side content and super fun to use, mega satisfying weapons, and it's not my favorite Resident Evil, not by far. If we put Resident Evil 1, 2 and 4 on one side and Resident Evil 0 and 5 on the other, Village is somewhere in the middle, together with 3, 6, 7 and the Revelations games. Why? Because even though it's a best hits album, I still rather prefer the actual albums whose best hits are coming from. Village is a collection of great moments, but those moments can sometimes feel a bit messy when actually put next to each other instead of creating one cohesive, strong experience. Then we also have the issue of Ethan Winters, which is someone who manages to be a pretty good and a terrible protagonist at the same time, going from realistic and relatable to an awkward one-liner machine. And I also honestly still don't know how to feel about this game's conclusion, and if anything, it makes me really curious and excited for Resident Evil 9. Because if there's something I love about this series is that even in its low points, every game still feels like its own thing. None of them can be mistaken for each other. Sure, you have your pure survival horror, hybrids and pure action, but within those categories, every game has qualities and quirks that make them distinct, and I'm really looking forward to the next version of that. And the best way to describe Final Fantasy X-2 is the exact polar opposite to Final Fantasy X. Let me quickly remind you of my feelings about it from last year. I enjoyed it, but it was a bit of a drag at times, with weak opening and story that occasionally suffered from poor pacing. It was all worth it because of how strong and emotional the final conclusion was, but still, it was an issue. So compared to that, X-2 is kinda insane. It's a weird game in which 80% of its content is non-linear and fully optional, from its various minigames to dozens of side quests, going from card game tournaments to handing out balloons to playing a monkey matchmaker to doing a PR campaign, all of which and way more are necessary for its infamously absurd 100% completion requirements. Its story also feels way more lighthearted in general. There's a final goal and there are more serious moments, sure, but majority of this game is really just dicking around and enjoying the vibe of the post-scene world. Especially if you actually put the time in and explore to see how the locations you visited before and mainly the people living in them changed, spending more time with Ten's two cast of likable main heroines in the process. And I didn't even mention the new combat system yet, where Ten had a relatively conservative turn-based combat with few twists. Ten 2 uses an active, real-time combat system in which you have the ability to time your attacks and make combos, together with the option to change between a huge variety of classes to adjust your strategy at any time, each of them coming with their own strategies and playstyles. It takes a bit to get used to, but once I did, it became my favorite turn-based combat I've seen yet. Not in my experience with those specifically is that extensive, but you know. So is this game better than Final Fantasy X? That's honestly a good question. It's definitely more entertaining with its gameplay, overall tone and storytelling that feels more like a collection of short stories, one that keeps you constantly engaged. But also, that tone can sometimes get a bit too much and get annoying. Its main story is definitely far weaker than of 10. Its mechanics can be overwhelming at first, its music sometimes got on my nerves quite a lot, and it has possibly the worst character ever put on paper. But if you can get over those problems, 10-2 is honestly one of the most relaxing and chill games I ever played. So ultimately, 10-2 feels like an ideal accompanying piece to 10, which it literally is. It's a lighthearted, cozy epilogue, one that is definitely worth going through, and I can't wait to get into more games from the franchise. Time for the yearly overview of my progression with the Yakuza games. Woo! I ended the last year look on the Yakuza 3 with my declaration of love for the series and excitement for the games I haven't played yet. And I'm happy to share that it wasn't misplaced, because I love Yakuza 4. Let's start with my favorite part about this entry. Its amazing usage of 4 main characters. All of them are insanely charming and likable, maybe apart from Seijima, but he grew on me as well. Some games don't manage even one good protagonist, so having 4 of those is insane. They all have their unique fighting styles and even activities only they can access, making the game feel constantly fresh and evolving, avoiding the occasional slow introduction of new things to do from previous games. The format of 4 main characters also gives the story a really interesting twist, as every chapter is told from a different perspective, making the plot way more engaging. I think I already mentioned my opinion on the story in Yakuza games before. They all have incredibly strong presentation and storytelling, combined with some of my favorite characters in any media, but they tend to be brought down by poor pacing and overly complicated endings full of plot twists that occasionally try way too hard. And I already heard about the infamous story of 4 before, so I was prepared for anything, but I was honestly really surprised how much I enjoyed it. The issue with pacing is solved by the mentioned use of multiple perspectives, and the twist is pretty wild and kinda dumb, sure, but I honestly really liked how the ending tied all of the subplots of the different characters together, made it all make relative sense. It's ridiculous and very melodramatic, sure, but I'm okay with that. Especially with all of the gameplay improvements it made from 3, from the snappy and expanded combat with more mechanics to play around with, to its streamlined RPG system, to fun new minigames and activities, to finally leaving some of the characters I really like alive. All I can say is that I can't wait to get to Yakuza 5, and if everything I've seen and heard about it turns out to be true, it might challenge Yakuza 0 for the championship title and become my favorite one in the series so far. And now we're finally getting to the big one. As you probably know, I was looking forward to this game a lot, and I was honestly planning another longer video dedicated just to it. But then I also remembered how hard the video was for me and how little time I have to make even this one, so yeah. Let's start with the most important question. Did it meet my expectations? I'm Not sure. Just to make sure right away, I enjoyed this game, I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, you don't dedicate over 100 hours of your life to something you don't enjoy. I also used to play League of Legends, but that's a different matter. The main reason I love Persona 4 is still here, and it's even better than before. The core gameplay loop, the slice of life management aspect, the loop of creating relationships, farming by engaging in a snappy turn-based combat, exploring the world, creating new personas and improving your current ones, all in the constraints of time limits and day-by-day system in which not every activity is available every day, forcing you to make constant plans and decisions as you go on. This is all combined with a once again fantastic presentation, from its stylish animations, character designs, UI and OST, even though I personally prefer sound of Persona 4 slightly more, but it's purely just an issue of taste and preference. Persona 5's score is still amazing and has a lot of tracks I love. So what is my main issue with Persona 5 then? There's two main things, the vibe and the main story. The first one is honestly not that serious. I simply didn't like some of the party members or the more fillerish parts of the story as much as I thought I would. Some of the hostility between party members was maybe a bit over the top at times, and the occasional fanservice is getting really annoying at this point. The main issue is that I simply didn't like the main story and themes of the dungeons as much. I think it's because the general main focus shifted from living with who you are and accepting yourself to making someone realize they're an awful person, which just sounds way less interesting to me. The main villain also wasn't as good, the pacing isn't great, and in general a lot of its story is just kind of more anime than Persona 4, more on the nose and simplified. I'm not saying Persona 4 didn't have similar moments, but Persona 5 drives it even further. And I didn't really adore main plot of Persona 4 either, I said so in my review, but the game's story also had other aspects that made the issue much less impactful, so ultimately, I still love this game, even though it has bigger issues than Persona 4 has. The gameplay is overall incredibly fun and addictive. Even the party members I didn't like eventually grew on me more, and even though I just spent the last few minutes explaining the reasons for why I don't like the story, it still has its moments for sure. Some parts are generally tense, and especially the content added in the Roller Edition is some of the best in the entire game, wrapping everything up in a really satisfying conclusion. But that wasn't the end for me. There was one more game left, the final one of this video. The best spin-off game I ever played. This was honestly the biggest surprise of the year for me. It's not like I expected to hate this game, not at all, but this is easily the top 5, if not top 3 of this year overall. Not only it has its own amazing qualities, it also addresses and fixes some of the issues I had with Persona 5 I just mentioned. First of all, the combat is incredible and it's better 10 to 1 in Persona 5. The fact that I tend to prefer action combat instead of a turn-based one obviously helps a lot as well, but I don't like it more just because of that. It's fast, snappy and incredibly satisfying while still being deeply tactical, requiring knowledge both of the character you're playing and the weaknesses of your enemies, which means that the combat turns into a satisfying stream of combos and powerful attacks, your arsenal of those growing the more you play as the individual characters. And yes, you're not limited just to Joker, you can easily switch and play as any of the party members, each of which has their own combos and mechanics, from Makoto adding an affinity to her basic combos to Ryuji's resilience to Sophie's mid-combo buffs. And with that we're getting to the second major reason for why I love this game so much. I also kinda think it has a better story and character writing than the game it's spin-offing. The core premise is immediately interesting and captivating. All of the new characters are lovely and they're honestly some of my faves in the entire series so far. The dialogue is sharp and funny, to the point where the interactions between the core cast feel way more natural and mainly friendly, which is something that was oddly enough sometimes missing from Royal. The presentation is once again incredible as well, from the flashy effects and smooth, cool animations to the fantastic soundtrack, including both awesome remixes of fan favorites and catchy new tracks. So is this overall better than Persona 5 Royal? Well, no, it misses my favorite thing about that game and the series overall, the slice of life management. Strikers is a really fun, entertaining game, but it's also a mostly linear one, your only possible distraction being a pretty max selection of side quests. One of the main progression systems does encourage interacting with your party members and completing some of those side quests for them, but that simply wasn't enough for me. There is no actual social links or exploration or day-by-day system, apart from the occasional date transition. The first hour or so is also pretty weak, and the structure of being forced to visit and leave every dungeon a few times can be maybe a bit jarring. But all of these are not something I would call major, experience-ruining issues, and the absence of slice-of-life aspect specifically is pretty understandable. It just wouldn't fit, either into the plot or the gameplay. Ultimately, this was a really strong conclusion to the games I wanted to finish this year, and I'm glad and I ended that list with it. The same way I'm ending off this video and maybe this year. Probably. I already talked about this in the previous episode, but just to very quickly recap. The final year of school is quickly closing in and I'm not sure how much free time I'll actually have left, let alone time I could put towards making videos. so I'm using the time I have left to make at least this video. It's true that briefly getting into Crew 2, Overwatch, Division and Forza Horizon 5 or going out to touch some grass on anime cons or Break Pride probably isn't helping my efficiency during this term break either, but you know. And hey, maybe I'll have some extra time or sudden rush of inspiration to just make something on a whim, but I'm really not promising anything. Only quote-unquote plan for this year I have in another overview video, even though there's not much to actually overview this year, but you know, there's a chance. Oh, and you probably noticed, I changed my channel name again. I'm Spunky now, nice to meet you. I know, another name change, but I just felt like it was the time to move away from a name I used during a pretty miserable time in my life, and shift towards one I'm currently using in general pretty much everywhere. I hope I'll get to make something worthwhile under this name, and I also hope you'll be here to see it, I really do. And I also really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and in case you did, please consider liking, sharing or even subscribing, it would help this channel a lot. My name is Spunky, thank you so much for watching, take care and I'll see you soon.